The dry African earth cracked beneath his feet as the blazing sun hung silently above. Every creature seemed to pause. The air was thick with tension, and not a single leaf dared to rustle. In the distance, a deep, agonizing cry echoed through the forest. Nuru, an old elephant with wisdom etched into every scar on his body, halted. That voice did not belong to any predator. It was desperate. It was young. It was drowning. Without hesitation, Nuru turned toward the sound, his massive legs thudding like drums on the forest floor. Vultures circled above, sensing weakness, but Nuru moved with purpose. As he approached the dried-up riverbed, the scene before him froze his soul. A tiny lion cub dangled helplessly inside a deep well, claws scraping the walls, eyes wide with panic. The pit was too deep, too steep. The cub was not going to survive, and yet no lioness was in sight. No roars, no response, just silence. Nuru looked around. The jungle was watching. Something was wrong. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching over the cub like a shelter. The cub looked up, whimpering, but Nuru did not flinch. Slowly, the wise giant extended his trunk, wrapping it around a branch. Lying nearby, the branch was long, strong, and flexible. Using it like a hook, Nuru tried reaching the cub, but the gap was too large. Sweat formed on his wrinkled forehead. Every second mattered. The cub's paws were slipping. Then Nuru did something no one expected. He knelt. With every ounce of strength in his tired legs, he brought himself lower and lower until his trunk could finally reach inside. The cub cried louder, sensing hope. Nuru wrapped his trunk gently around the tiny body and lifted him up with incredible care. The jungle held its breath. The cub was safe. But the real storm was yet to come. The cub clung to Nuru's trunk, trembling, its small heart pounding like thunder. Nuru gently placed it on the soft grass, then looked around. Still no sign of the mother. The forest was too quiet. Not a single bird sang. Something had disturbed the balance. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the east. Trees shifted. Leaves trembled, and there she was. A lioness emerged from the shadows, her golden eyes blazing with rage, confusion, and fear. She saw Nuru, towering over her cub, and instantly charged. The jungle erupted. Birds flew in panic. Monkeys screamed from the treetops, but Nuru did not move. He stood still, his massive frame calm like a mountain. The lioness reached him, roared furiously, but stopped. Her cub had already run to her, nuzzling against her leg, safe and alive. Her breath caught. She stared at Nuru. Her mind raced. Her instincts screamed to attack, but something in Nuru's eyes stopped her. There was no threat, only peace, only wisdom. The lioness lowered her head. She did not growl again. Instead, she sat beside her cub and watched Nuru silently. And, for a few precious moments, predator and prey forgot the rules. The jungle witnessed something ancient. An unwritten truth passed between them. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the land. And as Nuru turned to leave, the lioness did something no one could believe. She followed. Step by step, she walked behind him, her cub between them, guarded by both. The jungle could not understand, and neither could the hunters watching from a distance. Hidden behind trees with cameras and rifles, a group of men stared in disbelief. One of them whispered, "Are you seeing this?" The other replied, "This ... This changes everything." But their silence would not last long. One of them stepped on a twig. It snapped. The sound ripped through the forest like a gunshot. Nuru froze. The lioness turned. Her ears twitched. Danger was coming. And it was not from the wild Nur. Hugh turned slowly, his ears alert, his eyes fixed on the shadows. The hunters did not move. They hoped to stay unseen. But Nuru already knew. He had smelled them before they saw him. He stepped forward, placing himself between the lioness and the trees. His massive frame blocked her completely. The lioness growled low, sensing the threat. Her cub pressed against her leg. The jungle held its breath. One hunter raised his rifle. The leader shook his head. "No shots," he whispered. "This is rare. We capture, not kill." But their hesitation came too late. Nuru took one step forward and trumpeted so loud the forest shook. Birds exploded from trees. The ground quaked. The hunters stumbled back, terrified. In that moment, they saw what they had never seen before. Not just an elephant, not just a lioness, but a protector, a guardian of balance. The leader signaled retreat. But one hunter, young and nervous, panicked. He fired. The bullet missed Nuru, but hit a branch. It cracked, crashed to the ground, inches from the lioness and her cub. Instantly, the lioness sprang into action. Her roar shook the forest. She leapt into the shadows, faster than the human eye. Screams followed. Chaos erupted. Nuru charged, not to kill, but to defend. Trees fell. Earth split. The jungle responded. Every animal, bird and insect joined the cry. The forest was alive, and it was angry. The hunters fled, dropping cameras and weapons, crashing through the undergrowth, chased by the sound of fury. When silence returned, the sun had disappeared. Only the moon watched from above. Nuru stood still, breathing deeply. The lioness returned, blood on her fur, but her eyes calm. The cub followed, unharmed. No more enemies. No more fear. They stood together under the stars, 3 souls connected by fate. In that silent moment, the lioness did something ancient. She bowed her head, not in submission, but in respect. And Nuru responded the same. Then, like mist, she disappeared into the trees, her cub beside her. And Nuru, the elephant who had saved a lion, turned toward the river, unaware that the world had just witnessed a miracle. But far away, a man reviewed the footage the hunters had left behind. And what he saw would start something much greater than any one animal could imagine. The man watching the footage sat in a dark room, the only light coming from the screen. His eyes widened with every second. He paused, rewound, watched again. The elephant, the lioness, the hunters. None of it made sense. Yet it was real. He leaned back slowly. This was not just wildlife footage. This was a story no one would believe, but everyone needed to see. He worked for a global nature organization, but he was also a filmmaker. And he knew when his story had the power to change the world. He picked up the phone. "Send a team," he said. "Coordinates are on the tape. This is urgent." The jungle had returned to calm, but the winds of change had already begun. Back near the river, Nuru drank slowly, each sip thoughtful. He was old, wise, and his instincts told him that something had shifted, not just in the forest, but in the hearts of those who walked on 2 legs. The lioness, miles away now, carried her cub gently across a ridge. She looked back, just once, where the trees still held the memory of thunder and unity. For her, that moment would never be forgotten. Neither would it be for Nuru. The next morning, drones appeared above the canopy. Quiet, sleek, unnoticed, they recorded, scanned, tracked. The humans came with them scientists, journalists, conservationists. But they were not hunters. They came to understand. What they found shocked them. Footprints of lion and elephant, side by side, broken branches from the chase, claw marks near a crushed rifle. No bodies, but the jungle had hidden the evidence well. Then came the video. Edited, polished, and published to the world. People everywhere watched. Millions saw. An elephant protect a lion. Children cried. Adults gasped. Debates erupted. Was it real? Was it planned? Experts argued, but the truth could not be denied. Something incredible had happened in the forest. Something without words, without explanation, but filled with meaning. Nuru and the lioness became symbols of unity, of instinct, of unexpected. Friendship. Artists painted them. Poets wrote about them. Schools taught the story. Statues were made. But in the jungle, none of that mattered. The forest moved on. Nuru walked under the stars. The lioness hunted at dawn. Life continued, quiet and strong. Yet across the planet, a spark had lit a fire. The idea that different could protect different. That power could shield weakness. That enemies could become guardians. Nuru never knew what he had started. But the world would never forget what he had done. Far away from the jungle, in a cold office surrounded by towering buildings, a man in a black suit watched the story unfold on his screen. He was not a filmmaker. He was not a conservationist. He was a billionaire investor with eyes on every part of the world. He saw opportunity where others saw wonder. He turned to his assistant and whispered, "Find that place," quietly. At the same moment, in a small village near the edge of the forest, an old woman stirred a pot over an open fire. Her face held deep lines, her hands steady and slow. Children gathered around her. "Tell us the tale again," they begged. And she did. Her voice carried through the smoke and wind. She spoke of the mighty elephant who faced fire to save a cub. Of the lioness who waited, eyes wide, heart frozen. Of how the jungle itself seemed to breathe together in that single moment. The children listened without blinking. They had heard it before, but this time something was different. Because a stranger stood at the edge of the gathering. A man with a camera, a notebook, and eyes that looked for truth. He took notes, listened carefully, and left before sunrise. He was writing a book, and he knew this chapter would be the one the world would never forget. In the heart of the jungle, Nuru stopped beside an ancient tree. He pressed his trunk to the bark, feeling vibrations too soft for ears. Something distant, something loud was coming. Not danger, not violence, but curiosity. Voices, movement, machines. Change. The lioness, now with her cub grown stronger, watched the same sky. Birds flew in circles. Monkeys shrieked warnings. The forest was speaking. Not in words, but in energy. Nuru raised his head high. He remembered the flames, the fear, the silence that followed, and he remembered the choice. The step he took, not as an elephant, but as something more. As a being that could decide to protect, not destroy. Cameras would never capture what truly mattered. Books would not explain the feeling in the air. The moment when nature became more than survival, it became connection. Deep, pure, unspoken. The kind that crossed species, broke barriers, and moved the world. Days turned to weeks, and the jungle began to shift. Not from storms or hunger, but from attention. Drones hovered above treetops. Silent footsteps pressed into soil that had never known boots. Scientists came with instruments, measuring things that could never be measured. Nuru stood still, massive yet invisible, blending into the world that raised him. He watched them, observed without moving. They looked for patterns. He listened. For silence, he waited. The lioness and her cub had moved deeper into the undergrowth. They no longer feared the elephant, nor the world beyond. But the forest did. It felt the tension. Trees whispered it. Water carried it. The sky looked down and wondered what the humans would do next. A filmmaker named Claire arrived with one goal. She wanted to capture the untold story. She had heard. Whispers, fragments, tales from villages where children still spoke about the fire. She wanted the truth, not just a viral video or a documentary. She wanted the heartbeat, the soul of what had happened. She placed her camera down and sat in silence. No questions. No movement, just breath. Nuru stepped into the clearing, slow. As a shadow, she looked at him. He looked back. There was no roar, no trumpet, only recognition. She understood something then. This was not a story about animals saving animals. It was about something deeper, something forgotten. A kind of intelligence that did not come from cities or books. It came from stillness, from knowing when to act, from courage without violence. Nuru walked away. She did not follow. She turned off her camera. In that single act, she became part of the story. Back in the village, the old woman closed her eyes for the last time. But her words had already taken root. Children began carving the tale into stone. Artists painted it on walls. Poets sang it under stars. And slowly, quietly, the world began to shift. Not from force, but from understanding. In a world chasing speed, the jungle had shown the power of stillness. And it all began with one elephant, one lion cub, and a decision made not out of instinct, but out of choice. In a distant capital city, where boardrooms echoed with strategy, and investors spoke of numbers, the story reached ears it was never meant to reach. News networks caught wind of something strange happening deep within the forest. Headlines twisted facts. They spoke of an intelligent elephant, of a mutated lion pride, of possible military experiments in the wild. None of them were true, but they attracted attention. Satellites were redirected. Private contractors were sent. Claire, now back in her apartment, watched as her quiet footage was dissected by analysts who had never known the smell of rain on jungle leaves. They labeled it, tried to own it. She knew they could never understand. But one evening, her phone rang. It was Marcus King, the former SEAL turned conservationist. He had seen her film. He did not care about views or awards. He cared about what it meant. He spoke softly, told her about the coded patterns in the elephant's behavior, explained how animals once guided men, not the other way around. She listened, not as a journalist, but as a student. Marcus asked her to return, not with cameras, not with sponsors, but with trust. She agreed. Days later, they stood together on the edge of the same jungle clearing. The air was thick, alive, humming with energy. Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out an old compass. It had no modern tech, no screen, just metal and memory. He placed it on the ground. Nuru appeared, as if summoned by purpose. His eyes met Marcus's, not hostile, not curious, acknowledging. The compass needle spun wildly. Marcus smiled. Claire felt the ground shift beneath her. Not from movement, from meaning. The elephant stepped closer. No barriers, no commands, only choice. Marcus whispered something no one else heard. Claire never asked what it was. But in that moment, she realized they were not there to study Nuru. They were there to learn from him. Not about survival, but about responsibility. About what it means to have power and not use it. About choosing peace when war is easy. The jungle watched. The world held its breath. And the story continued, not in headlines, but in the space. Between each breath, the world had turned its gaze toward the jungle, but the jungle never looked back. Deep within the green, where silence ruled and time had no name, a gathering had formed, not of beasts, not of hunters, but of guardians. Nuru stood at the center, his tusks casting long shadows as moonlight filtered through the trees. Around him, creatures gathered: lions, wolves, birds, and even the silent crocodile. not drawn by instinct, drawn by something deeper. Claire watched. From afar, her presence was allowed but not acknowledged. This was not her moment. This was theirs. A council of the wild. A decision was being made, not with words, with gestures, with shared memory, with understanding born from centuries of survival. Marcus leaned against a tree, arms folded, heart steady. He had seen conflict. He had walked through war. But he had never witnessed anything this sacred. Nuru lowered his head. The lioness stepped forward, not to challenge, to honor. She pressed her forehead to his trunk, a sign of allegiance. The wolves howled not a threat, a signal. They would protect the borders. The birds took to the air. They would watch from above. Something old had awakened. A pact was being renewed. Not written, felt. Claire's camera remained in her bag. This was not for views, not for fame. This was for truth, for memory, for those who forgot that nature was once the teacher. Nuru turned and walked into the darkness. The others followed, each returning to their places, their roles, their rhythm. The jungle pulsed with unity. Not one sound disturbed the peace. Claire whispered, not to Marcus, not to herself, but to whatever force had allowed her to witness it. She promised to protect it, to speak only when needed, to listen more than speak. Marcus nodded. He had made the same vow long ago. Together, they walked back, leaving no trail. Behind them, the jungle closed, not in defense, in trust, ready for what came next, but not afraid. Morning light spilled across the forest, not loud, not rushed, just present. Claire awoke beneath the thick canopy, unsure for a moment if it had all been a dream. But Marcus stood near the fire, silent, alert, peaceful. That confirmed it. None of it had been imagined. Today was not just another sunrise. Today meant something. She rose without speaking. There was nothing to say. Words would only break what had formed. The silence spoke louder than voices ever could. They packed slowly, not with hesitation, with respect. They left behind no trash, no trace, no damage. Only footsteps, which the forest would soon erase. As they walked, Claire noticed something unusual. Birds flew overhead, not random. They guided. Creatures peeked through bush, not with fear, with curiosity. She and Marcus were being escorted, honored. The jungle had accepted them. Few ever reached that place. At the edge of the forest, they paused. A final breath, a last look. Not to say goodbye, to say thank you. Marcus placed his hand on a tree trunk, not a gesture of possession, one of gratitude. Claire mimicked him, her fingers against the bark, her heart thudding with quiet reverence. And they stepped out. Civilization greeted them with sound engines, voices, signals. But the jungle's echo stayed in their bones. Claire did not speak on the drive back. Neither did Marcus. There was no need. The mission was no longer about recording what they saw. It was about protecting what they knew. At the base camp, officials waited. News had spread of something extraordinary. People wanted answers. Cameras, microphones, bright lights, all ready. Claire stood before them, not nervous, focused. She did not share the secrets. She shared the lessons. Respect, balance, listening, watching. She reminded them that not every truth needs exposure. Some need guardianship. The media tried to twist her words. They wanted spectacle, but she offered wisdom. Marcus, behind her, said only one sentence. If you listen closely, nature speaks louder than any screen ever could. And then they left the cameras behind, choosing action over attention. Weeks passed. Life returned to its rhythm. Planes flew. Phones rang. Screens blinked. But Claire and Marcus had changed. Not outwardly, internally. Their decisions grew quiet, careful, deliberate. Claire declined interviews. Marcus avoided conferences. They worked, but not for fame, for purpose. A letter arrived one morning. No name, no return address. Only a symbol etched. In charcoal, shaped like a leaf, curled around a flame. Claire opened it. A message was inside. Only 7 words. You are trusted now. Stay ready for more. That night, Marcus received the same note. Different handwriting. Same symbol. Different. Paper. Same weight. They understood. This was not the end. It was the beginning. There were more places like the jungle. More secrets. More tests. The world was layered, deeper than most saw. And someone or something was watching who proved worthy. Claire stood by her window, watching the moon shift clouds into silver ghosts. She did not feel fear. She felt calling. A summons. She whispered, not to herself, but to the wind, we are listening. Somewhere beyond mountains, past deserts, below oceans, ancient beings waited. Not monsters, not myths. Guardians. They needed protectors on the surface. Voices among humans. Claire and Marcus had been chosen. Not for strength, not for fame, for understanding, for restraint, for silence when noise tempted. A knock at Claire's door broke the quiet. She opened it slowly. Marcus stood there. Number. Smile, no alarm, just a nod. In his hand, a map. Old, cracked, ink faded. Symbols none could decipher except them. He spoke once. Are you ready to go again? Claire did not hesitate. She grabbed her pack. No checklist. No mirror. No doubt. They walked into darkness, not blindly. With trust. For in that silence, under stars, far from cameras and questions, truth lives wild and free. And those who guard it never walk alone.